19. Counteroffers, multiple offers, and when you actually have a contract. Mike pushes David's $605,000 offer across the kitchen table and says, "I'm not rejecting it. Let's counter at $615,000. Jennifer agrees, but then adds, "And I'm not leaving the washer and dryer." Mike points toward the patio, and that television definitely isn't staying. Sarah opens her laptop and says, "Good. Now let's slow down and go through every term we're changing." That's an important moment, because a counteroffer isn't simply a new price. Sarah and the Reynolds decide on $615,000. Reduce the seller concession David requested. Agree to David's proposed closing date. Include the refrigerator, exclude the washer and dryer, and make clear that the patio television is not included. Sarah carefully reviews the proposed counter with Mike and Jennifer before they sign. Because negotiations create documents that work together. The original purchase offer doesn't simply disappear from history because a counteroffer exists. The counteroffer modifies particular terms, and Sarah needs to understand how those documents interact. This is where agents can get into trouble when negotiations move quickly. Imagine Sarah changes the price, but forgets that Mike also wanted to change the seller concession. David accepts the counter exactly as written. Mike later says, "I told you I wasn't paying that much toward his costs." Sarah answers, "I know, but I forgot to change it." That's not a conversation any listing agent wants to have. Read the entire document before your client signs it. Sarah sends the counteroffer to Daniel at 8:15 p.m. It contains an expiration deadline the following day. Daniel confirms receipt and tells Sarah he'll review it with David. At 9:10 a.m. the next morning, Sarah's phone rings. It's another buyer's agent. "We showed the Reynolds property yesterday. My clients are writing an offer." Now things become interesting. By noon, Sarah has a second offer. Purchase price, $617,500. Mike sees the number and immediately says, "Great, take that one." Sarah stops him. "Let's read it first. Didn't we just learn this?" The second offer is higher in price, but the buyers request a larger seller concession. Their proposed closing date is later than the Reynolds prefer, and their financing terms differ from David's. Suddenly, $617,500 isn't automatically better simply because it's the largest number. Sarah prepares updated estimated net information and reviews the major terms side by side with Mike and Jennifer. Now Mike asks, "Do we have to give David the first chance because he made the first offer?" Sarah explains that receiving an offer first does not automatically make it the offer the seller must select. The Reynolds need to evaluate their contractual position and the available offers according to their goals. Sarah should provide competent advice, but the sellers make the decision. Then Mike asks the question agents hear constantly in multiple offer situations. "Can you tell David there's another offer?" That needs to be handled carefully. If Sarah is a realtor, NAR's Code of Ethics provides additional guidance concerning disclosure of the existence of offers, including seller approval. Brokerage procedures and applicable agreements also matter. What Sarah should never do is invent competition. Imagine Sarah tells Daniel, "We have 3 other offers," when no other offers exist, simply hoping David will increase his price. That's not aggressive negotiation. Sarah also shouldn't casually disclose the exact confidential terms of one buyer's offer to another buyer without appropriate authority. For example, telling the second buyer, "David offered $605,000, so make yours $610,000 and you'll beat him," may improperly reveal negotiating information and undermine the seller's strategy. The seller controls the negotiation. The listing agent facilitates it. Now Jennifer asks, "Can we just tell everybody to give us their highest and best?" That may be one strategy, depending on the seller's instructions and the circumstances, but agents shouldn't treat the phrase highest and best like a magic button. Think about what can happen. A buyer may increase the price but reduce concessions. Another may remove or modify terms. Another may decide not to participate. A buyer may believe there is more competition than actually exists if the communication is handled poorly. Sarah needs clear seller instructions and should communicate accurately. Mike and Jennifer decide they want to give David an opportunity to respond while they evaluate the second offer. Sarah contacts Daniel according to the seller's instructions without revealing the confidential details of the competing offer. David reviews the Reynolds counter. He agrees to $615,000, the revised concession, the property terms, and the closing date. Daniel sends the accepted counter back to Sarah. Sarah sees David's signature and almost texts Mike, "Congratulations, we have a deal." Almost. Instead, she stops. This is another place where experienced agents slow down. A signature is extremely important, but Sarah should understand the contract's provisions concerning acceptance and delivery and confirm that the required steps have occurred. She should also verify that the documents are complete, the acceptance occurred within the applicable time, and the parties actually agreed to the same terms. Why? Because contract disputes often begin with statements like, "I thought we were under contract." Imagine David signs after the counteroffer has expired. Imagine he changes another term before signing. Imagine the accepted document is never delivered as required. Imagine someone signs the wrong version. These aren't details Sarah should guess about. The Arizona Realtors Purchase Contract and Counteroffer forms provide useful examples of how acceptance, delivery, expiration, and modified terms may be addressed. Agents should know the actual forms they're using and follow their brokerage procedures rather than relying on memory from a previous transaction. Sarah confirms that David accepted the Reynolds counter according to the applicable terms and that the acceptance has been properly communicated and delivered. Now she calls Mike and Jennifer. "Okay," Sarah says, "now I can say it. We're under contract." Mike laughs. "You made that way more complicated than I thought it would be." Sarah replies, "And we're just getting started." She's right. Getting the contract signed isn't the finish line. It's the beginning of a new set of deadlines and responsibilities. David now has contractual rights involving inspections and investigations. The lender will continue processing financing. Title and escrow will become heavily involved. Property disclosures remain important. Repairs may be requested. An appraisal may create another negotiation. And every deadline matters. That's why the next chapter shifts from getting the offer accepted to keeping the transaction together. We'll begin Chapter 5, from contract to closing, protecting the seller through escrow with Section 17. Under contract, earnest money, escrow, title, and the clock starts running. Online discussion 1. Mike wants to counter David's offer by changing the price, but also wants different concessions and personal property terms. Why should Sarah carefully review the entire counteroffer? Answer. The counteroffer may modify several provisions of the original offer, and the parties need to understand exactly which terms are changing and which remain in effect. Sarah should not assume that changing the price automatically changes other provisions. Careful review helps prevent the seller from agreeing to a term that was supposed to be modified but was accidentally left unchanged. 2. A second offer arrives at $617,500, while David's negotiations are continuing. Should Sarah automatically recommend the higher-priced offer? Answer. No. Sarah should help the Reynolds evaluate the complete terms, including concessions, financing, closing date, contingencies, earnest money, property terms, and estimated proceeds. A higher purchase price may or may not produce the most favorable overall transaction for the sellers. 3. David signs the counteroffer. Why should Sarah verify acceptance, timing, delivery, and the documents before announcing that the property is under contract? Answer. Contract formation depends on the actual agreement and applicable provisions, not merely the appearance of a signature. Sarah should confirm that the proper document was accepted, the acceptance occurred within the required time, no unauthorized changes were made, and delivery or other contractual requirements were satisfied before representing the transaction status to the parties.